For 15 years, the neighbors in that building felt a little sorry for her. Same unit, same peeling kitchen cabinets, same rent check, while everyone around her upgraded, moved out, moved up. They assumed she couldn't afford better. They were wrong in a way that would take 15 years to become visible, and by then she was already gone. Her name was Delia Marsh, and she worked as a hospital pharmacist in a mid-sized city where the winters ran long and the rents ran, by national standards, reasonable. She moved into Unit 3B when she was 23, fresh out of school, sharing the space with a roommate and a radiator that clanked like a man knocking to be let in. The building was fine. Not charming, not terrible. Beige hallway carpet, a laundry room in the basement with 2 machines and one of them always broken. Everyone treats a place like that as a starting point, a first chapter. You live there while you're figuring things out, and then you graduate to somewhere with a gym, a doorman, a balcony, an elevator that doesn't groan. That's the script. That's what the apartment is for. Delia stayed. Not for 2 years. Not for 5. 15. And at 38, she stopped working. Not slowed down. Not went part-time. Stopped, with enough behind her that the paycheck became optional. The math had been finished for a while by then. She just took a few more years to believe it. Here's the thing that makes this story worth your next 20 minutes. It wasn't the apartment. It looks like the apartment. That's the surface story, the one that fits on a thumbnail. And if you walk away with only that, you'll try to copy the wrong thing and it won't work. Stay with me, because the actual mechanism underneath is stranger, and it has almost nothing to do with sacrifice. It has to do with something I'm going to call the invisible invoice. I'll come back to that. Start with what everyone around her was doing, because that's the control group and you need it. In her building alone, over those 15 years, she watched roughly 40 households cycle through. Young couples, nurses, grad students, a guy who fixed pianos. Almost all of them left the same way. Something good happened, and the good thing immediately converted into a bigger housing payment, a raise, a promotion, a partner moving in, a bonus, and within 4 months, a lease somewhere nicer. Nobody thinks of this as spending. That's the whole trick of it. When you take a new job at $11,000 more per year and move into an apartment that costs $700 more per month, you don't experience that as buying something. You experience it as arriving somewhere. The upgrade feels like a natural consequence of your own progress. The way a tree gets taller. It doesn't feel like reaching into your pocket. It has almost nothing to do with discipline. It's a visibility problem, and visibility problems are invisible by definition, which is a stupid sentence and also completely true. You cannot resist a purchase you don't perceive as a purchase. That's the invisible invoice. Every month, an amount leaves your life to buy a standard of living you never sat down and consciously chose. It's not one decision. It's 100 small ratchets that only turn one direction. And housing is where the ratchet turns hardest, because housing is the largest line in almost every American budget. Federal consumer spending data has held remarkably steady on this for decades. Housing consumes roughly a third of the average household's total outlay, more in expensive metros. Nothing else comes close. Transportation is second, and it's not a photo finish. So when we talk about someone staying in the same apartment for 15 years, we are not talking about a quirky frugality habit. We are talking about the single largest lever in a person's financial life, held completely still while their income moved. Now watch what that does. Delia's starting salary was around $52,000. Not poverty, not wealth. Over 15 years, with promotions and moving to a role overseeing clinical inventory, she ended up in the high 80s. Never 6 figures. Let me repeat that, because it matters more than anything else in this video. She never earned 6 figures. Her rent started at $840, split with a roommate. When the roommate left after 4 years, she took the whole thing herself. The landlord raised it, gently, the way landlords do with tenants who never call, never break anything, and always pay on the first. Over 15 years it climbed to about $1,300. Her income roughly doubled. Her housing cost went up around 55%. And she absorbed a roommate's exit inside that. That gap is not a virtue. It's a machine. Because here's what almost nobody sees clearly. It was never about how much she saved out of what she earned. It was about the fact that every raise arrived and found nowhere to go. There was no new lease waiting to eat it, no larger space to furnish, no commute that required a nicer car to make tolerable. The raise landed in an account, and because she'd set the transfer up years earlier and never touched it, it kept landing there whether she paid attention or not. The gap does all the work. Let me put real numbers on that, because this is where it stops being a nice idea and becomes arithmetic. Say the difference between staying put and doing the normal upgrade cycle is $900 a month. That's modest. It's 1 move to a nicer building, not 3. $900 a month, invested in a plain broad market index fund, at a long-run return of about 7% after inflation, over 15 years. That's roughly $280,000. 15 years. One decision, made once, maintained by doing nothing. And notice what she did not do. She didn't clip coupons. She didn't skip vacations. She went to Portugal twice and Iceland once. She didn't stop eating out. She wasn't monkish. She wasn't extreme. And if you'd sat across from her at dinner, you'd have seen an ordinary woman ordering an ordinary second glass of wine. She just refused, exactly once, to let her fixed costs follow her income. Here's the part everyone misses. We treat frugality as a war of 1,000 small battles. Cancel the subscription. Make the coffee at home. Bring the lunch. And every one of those requires you to win, individually, over and over, forever. You have to be disciplined on Tuesday and disciplined again on Wednesday. And the moment you're tired or sad or celebrating something, you lose a battle. Fixed costs work the opposite way. You decide once and then the decision holds itself. Nobody has to feel strong on a Wednesday for rent to stay the same. That asymmetry is the entire ballgame. And almost all financial advice is aimed at the wrong half of it. Think about a man named Curtis Rhee, who worked 2 floors down from Delia in billing. Curtis was, by any reasonable measure, better with money than she was on a day-to-day basis. He tracked every expense in a spreadsheet with color-coded categories. He knew what he spent on coffee in March. He negotiated his internet bill annually and won. In the same 15 years, Curtis moved 4 times. Each move was justified: a shorter commute, a better school district, more space when the second kid came. Each one was reasonable in isolation. His housing cost went from $900 to $2,600 while his salary went from $61,000 to $94,000. Curtis was fighting 1,000 small battles and winning most of them. He was also losing the only one that was scored. At the end of that stretch, he had about $41,000 in retirement savings and a spreadsheet he was proud of. And here's the part one want you to hold on to. Curtis was not undisciplined. Curtis was more disciplined than Delia. He was just aiming his discipline at the small numbers while the large number moved freely. One clean lesson. The size of the line matters more than your effort on it. It gets stranger because the second thing that happened to Delia is something people almost never account for. And it's the reason this compounds beyond what the rent math alone predicts. When you don't move, your entire cost structure calcifies in a good way. She kept the same car for 11 years. Partly because her commute stayed 8 minutes and a car that only goes 8 minutes doesn't die. She never bought new furniture, because the rooms never changed shape. She never paid a security deposit, a moving company, a lease break fee, a utility hookup, a new set of curtains that didn't fit the last windows. She never got the 2-month spending spike that follows every single move. The one where you're suddenly at a big box store buying a shower caddy and a rug and a lamp and telling yourself it's a one-time thing. Housing is not one line item. Housing is the anchor line item. It drags a dozen others behind it. Nobody puts moved apartments in the expense category where it belongs, which is a multi-$1,000 purchase with a recurring monthly subscription attached. Sit with that one. Now, I want to be careful here, because there's a version of this video that turns into a lecture about how you should never move. And that version is both annoying and wrong. Sometimes you should move. A move that shortens a 90-minute commute to 15 minutes buys back 400 hours a year of your life and is often financially positive on its own. A move that gets you out of a place that's harming you is not a budget question. A move that puts a child in a functional school is a value judgment, not a math error. The point is not don't move. The point is, know which invoice you're signing. Because the second and quieter thing about that building, and this is the piece that I think actually explains the 15 years, is who Delia was standing next to. Consider a woman named Sabine Okoro, an occupational therapist, 31, who did everything right by the numbers. She saved 14%. She had no credit card debt. She read the books. And she spent 9 years feeling perpetually behind, checking her balance with a kind of low background dread. Convinced she was failing. She wasn't failing. She was living in a building where the median household income was about 60% higher than hers. Every neighbor's normal was her stretch. Her sense of a reasonable car and a reasonable vacation and what people my age have was calibrated against a group she'd been randomly assigned to buy a lease. When she moved to a different neighborhood, not cheaper by much, just different, her savings rate went up 4 points inside a year and she made no conscious decision to change anything. Her spending simply reverted to the local normal. One clean lesson: you don't choose your standard of living. You absorb it from whoever's nearby. And this is the thing about Delia's beige hallway that I find genuinely wild. She was surrounded, for 15 years, by people who were mostly at the start of their careers. Grad students, new nurses, the piano guy. Her reference group kept resetting to 26-year-olds while she aged into her late 30s on a growing salary. Her sense of normal was permanently anchored low, and it cost her nothing to maintain, because she wasn't resisting anything. There was nothing to resist. Nobody in her hallway was buying a boat. Willpower is what you need when your environment is pulling against you. She simply never built an environment that pulled. If this is landing, subscribe. This channel breaks down the real numbers every week. Now, the next part is where it separates the people who talk about money from the ones who quietly build it. Because there's a question you should be asking, and if you're not asking it, ask it now. How did staying put turn into retiring at 35? A $280,000 gap is a lot of money. It's not enough to stop working at 35. Right, it isn't. Here's what actually happened. And it's the counterintuitive reveal this whole thing has been building toward. The savings didn't retire her. The low cost of living retired her. Retirement math has two inputs and everybody obsesses over one of them. Everybody talks about the pile. Nobody talks about the whole. And the whole, your annual spending, is the far more powerful variable, because it works on both ends of the equation simultaneously. Every $1,000 a year you don't spend is $1,000 a year you can save. Fine. Obvious. But it's also $1,000 a year you never have to fund again, for the rest of your life. At a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, that $1,000 of annual spending requires $25,000 of invested capital to sustain permanently. So cutting $100 a month from your fixed costs doesn't save you $1,200 a year. It removes $30,000 from the finish line and adds $1,200 a year of speed toward the finish line at the same time. Read that again slowly. Delia's total annual spending, in her late 30s, was around $34,000. Curtis, 2 floors down, was spending about $78,000. Same city, same era. Delia's number required roughly $850,000 of assets to sustain forever. Curtis's required nearly $2 million. She wasn't running the same race faster. She was running a race less than half as long. Nobody tells you that the finish line moves. Everybody acts like the number is fixed and your only job is to sprint at it. But the number is set by your monthly life. And your monthly life is set almost entirely by 3 or 4 large fixed decisions that most people make in their 20s, half-consciously, based on what their coworkers are doing. She made one of those decisions on purpose. That's it. That's the whole secret. It's not glamorous and it doesn't sell a course. Let me give you one more character, because there's a failure mode here I don't want you walking into. A man named Theo Vance heard a story like this one and went hard. Moved into a place he hated, roommate he didn't like, a 40-minute bus commute, a bedroom with one window facing a wall. He saved aggressively for 19 months and then quit. Not the job, the plan. He moved into a place that cost more than his original apartment, bought furniture on a credit card, and spent the next 2 years undoing what he'd built. Because he'd been white-knuckling it. He'd treated it as a sentence to serve rather than a life to live. Delia liked her apartment. That's the part people skip. She liked the light in the afternoon. She knew the guy at the corner store. Her commute was 8 minutes and she walked it. She had a chair by the window that she'd owned for 12 years and would have taken a bullet for. One clean lesson. The sustainable version isn't the cheapest one. It's the one you'd choose again on a bad day. So what do you actually do with this? First, find your invisible invoice, not your coffee. Your 4 biggest recurring costs: housing, transportation, insurance, and whatever subscription-shaped thing has crept into your life. Add them up. That's the number that decides your outcome. Everything else is noise. And you've probably been spending your entire budgeting energy on the noise. Second, before your next upgrade, ask one honest question. Am I buying this, or am I matching someone? There's no wrong answer. There's just an answer you actually gave. Third, when a raise comes, move the increase into an automatic transfer before your lifestyle notices it exists. Not half of it. The whole thing. At first, you were living fine last month. Your standard of living can stay where it is for 1 more year and nothing bad will happen to you. Fourth, look at who you're standing next to. If your normal feels expensive, check whose normal it actually is. That's not a character flaw. That's calibration. And calibration is an environment problem with an environment solution. Fifth, keep it plain. A high-yield savings account for the money you'll need soon. A broad, boring index fund for the money you won't. You are not going to out-clever this. Nobody does. And if you want the foundations under all of this, how the compounding actually works, what a withdrawal rate really means, why a small percentage difference in fees eats years off your life, that's the video I'd point you to next. It's the floor this whole thing stands on. Now go back to that hallway. 15 years of beige carpet and a laundry room with 1 broken machine. 40 households cycling past her, each one leaving for somewhere better, each one privately a little sorry for the pharmacist in 3B who never seemed to get ahead. Every one of them was buying something enormous and calling it a lease. She was the only person in that building who knew what things cost. And on a Tuesday in March, she handed in her badge, walked home in 8 minutes, and sat down in a 12-year-old chair by a window with good afternoon light, in an apartment that had just bought her the rest of her life. They thought she couldn't afford to leave. She was the only one who could.